Getting students to have discussions with one another is a great way to allow them to build their oral language and to process their thinking skills before you have them jump into really challenging tasks like writing. And so in this video, I wanted to share 3 very simple ways that you can group students up for various collaborative work that you might be doing throughout the school year. So grouping students can be challenging. You might end up getting the moans and the groans of, oh, I don't want to work with that person, or can I work with my best friend? Or the big question that is always asked, do we get to choose our own partners? Instead of having to answer all those questions, instead always have a strategy in place to ensure that students are being grouped with a variety of learners across their classroom. At the end of the day, I always like to remind any of my students, it's not about always choosing to work with your best friend, because you may not get to work with your best friend every time. We have to learn strategies. We have to learn how to be able to work collaboratively with anyone, no matter if we like them or if we don't like them. And so I used these simple strategies to be able to group my students into either pairs or either groups of 3 or 4, depending on the activity that we were working on. And these were so simple to be able to use inside of my classroom. And every time we did it, I was able to keep my students from moaning and groaning and asking that dreaded question. So what are these 3 different activities that I can share with you? So the first one is going to be any form of a puzzle pairing. And I like puzzle pairings because it gets students to have to look for the pieces to the puzzle. And they're so focused on finding the pieces to their puzzle that they're not really thinking about who they're having to work with. They're more just thinking about, can I find the person who has the puzzle piece that fits with mine? And so to do this, you can do it several different ways. And one of the things that I have done is placed some into my Bridging Literacy community where teachers can go and grab some of those resources. So if you're somebody who's interested in joining the community, I'm going to leave some links so that you can check out to see how we can help to provide you resources and support you as you go through literacy instruction for 3rd through 6th grade. So inside the community, one of the things that I've done is I've placed these various quotes. And quotes are really simple and easy because it's not something that is going to be time consuming on your part to create, or it's not going to be something that I feel like is going to be a real big differentiator. Now, I have 2 different versions of these puzzle pairings. And the first version that I created are going to be color versions like this. Now, the only thing with the color versions is that there are 3 different sets of them, but kids can very easily find which colors fit theirs, and so this may not take as long. Now, if you want things to be super snappy and you want them to find their pairs and then just move on, absolutely, this is a great choice, because if you pull 3 of the oranges and 3 of the greens, then they're still going to have to do some process of elimination as far as which orange they can be able to pair with. So I started off by creating these different quotes that I've just placed onto 4 rectangles to a page. I also have a version where they're completely blank. There's nothing to them, but I printed them all on red. Not my favorite color of choice, but this is the cardstock that I had. So I printed those quotes off that just did not have any color whatsoever. So this is going to make it a little bit more challenging for students. The other version that I have and that I've used for years is going to be book puzzles. Now, these are probably my absolute favorite because I am a literacy teacher through and through, and this was my way to get kids also looking at some of the favorite books that I have. So what I did is I just picked out some of my favorite books that I'd like to share with my students. I put 4 to a page, as you can kind of see here with these images. Like you can see that I just had all of them there. Nothing super fancy. I didn't add borders. I didn't do anything. So I printed them out onto colored cardstock, and then I have to laminate them. Now you're probably asking yourself, but wait, Bridget, these are not Puzzles. Well, they're not puzzles yet, my friend. We have to make them into puzzles. But what's so nice about this method of doing it is that you can create any form or shape of puzzle that you like, rather than just doing the very generic-y type of puzzles that you might see in stores or through some form of a teachers pay teachers. So at this point, what I've done is I have laminated my pages, and then I decided to go ahead and cut some out to show you how to create your puzzles. Now, here's the really important piece to remember, that you want to have two sets of each of your puzzles. This comes into play especially if you have an odd number of students. You want to make sure that you have a set of puzzles that allows you to either pick a 3 or pick a group of 4, and mix that in as you start to build these out. So I would always have 2 different sets. I would have a set of 3 pieces for one puzzle set, and then I would have a set of 4 pieces for each book puzzle set. In order to make these, it is very, very simple. All you have to do is just cut weird shapes. You first need to decide, how many am I going to have? So I'm going to show you each of them. So if I did, let's say, this one as a group of 4, here's how I would do it. I would simply start cutting out, and I like to add curves. 1, 2, 3, weird angles, 4. So they are truly these weird, odd shapes that students then have to put together. Now, when you're doing this, you want to make sure you keep the pieces together. So what I would recommend is to just have some paper clips. And with those paper clips, you would just clip the puzzle set together and then put these in a Ziploc bag and then label the Ziploc bag groups of 4 puzzle set. That way you can keep track of it. So again, I would just kind of start to create my weird shapes. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now I have 4 pieces to this puzzle set, and then I would just paper clip those together. Same thing here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I have these sets that I'm making for each one. Now, here is where it would come into play that if you had an odd group of students one day, maybe you have an even class. However, one day when you're grouping students, you have an odd set. You could have a set of 4 and then a bag of a set of 3 of these same puzzle sets. So depending on how you want to be able to mix your students, you can mix them. So what I would normally do is I would count out how many I'd need of the group size that I want. And then depending on my number of students, I would just pull one from the 3 set. So then I could break this one apart into 3s. So that's what that one looks like. Here is this version here. These are my favorite to do. So I'm going to do these as a group of 3. So I would just cut some weird shapes. 1. I like to add in the curves to these because it just makes it so much more fun for the kids, so they don't feel like everyday normal puzzles. Now this one I could just do 1. You can make it pretty basic, like that's fairly simple. It doesn't always have to be curved and kind of funky, but it does make it really interesting for them. The kids always enjoy doing these as well. So making the puzzles. And now I have a set of 3 in my book puzzles. So very simple to make. Again, all I would do is just put them into a Ziploc bag, and then I would label the Ziploc bag groups of 3 puzzle set, groups of 4 puzzle set. And it makes it very easy for me to be able to sort them out and get them ready for grouping. When you hand these out to students, I like to hand them out upside down to them. And then I allow them to get up, and they will then find their group pairings. Once students have their pairings, I tell them to take a seat exactly where they are and to keep their puzzle set together. And then what I do is I will walk around with my paper clips, and then I will just put them together, paper clip them, and then put them back inside of my bags as students are working or having discussions collaboratively. So these are very, very simple, very fun. If you are in the Bridging Literacy community, you have access to the puzzle sets that I have made. That way you can just go ahead and just print and be able to laminate and cut those out and have them ready to go for school. All right, so let's talk about the second way that I will group students. Now that was more of a group collaborative discussion. So if you want to have groups of 3s or 4s, this one is great for partners. So if you just want to partner them up with somebody different than just their elbow partner, especially if you are somebody who has assigned seats, or if you let your students sit freely and they just always are sitting next to their best friends, you want to get them opportunities to talk with other kids in the classroom so they gain different perspectives on various topics that you're teaching. So one of the things that I made back when I taught kindergarten were pairing cards. And so I've updated these pairing cards to be a little bit more design cute than I have and had in the past, but they come in 2 different sets. So the first one is going to be a set of opposites. So you would have all of these laminated, cut out, and it would just be the same idea. You can paper clip the opposite cards, and it makes it very easy for you to be able to count them out before you start to hand them out to students, because you want to make sure that you have the pairs available for students to be able to find. So these are very simple for them to go through and find their partners. Now, this one is not the favorite that I have. My favorite is by far my food pairings. So I don't know what about them, but they are just absolutely adorable, and they're my favorite. So these are food pairings. So carrots and peas, burgers and fries, salt and pepper. And these are great, especially for upper elementary. So you can very easily incorporate these into your day and kids don't feel as kiddish. The opposite cards are great and fun, but these by far are always like the favorites. For students to be able to pair up easily. So again, all you have to do is print them onto cardstock, laminate them, cut them out, and paper clip those together so that way you can put students into partners. So the way that I would do this is I would give them their cards and I would tell them that you're going to stand up, you're going to ask if they have, and you would fill in the blank. So I would have to be thinking about what is my food pairing. And I could say, I have spaghetti. Do you have meatballs? And so if they said that they do have meatballs, then they could go ahead and pair up together. They would take a seat, they would place their pairs on the floor and be ready for the next part of their directions. So that is normally how I structure it to make sure it is organized and that there is no chaos happening inside of my classroom. So again, these are available within the Bridging Literacy community. If you are a member, you can go to the resources section and download those and have them ready to go. The last method that I have for you is one that you don't need to print anything, and it's just a good old deck of cards. What I like about the deck of cards is that there is a variety of ways that you can group students. Now, these are an old set that I've had. They are M&M version from Las Vegas when we went on a trip there. But what's wonderful is that you can group them again in so many different ways. So here are some different ideas if you wanted to just have a deck of cards ready to go to be able to sort them out. Now, you will have to prep this in advance. So you will need to be thinking about how many students you're going to have in class that day, and then how you're going to end up grouping them and sorting out those cards so that you only hand out those cards. So The first way that you could do this is by having two large groups. Maybe you want to do some form of a game and you want to separate kids. So you could easily have them separate themselves by if you have a red card or if you have a black card. So red on one side, black on the other side. But you would want to make sure that you would count how many you would need. So if you have 20 kids, you were going to have 10 of each color separated before you send them or give them their cards to start to group themselves. So that's the first way. The next way is grouping them into 3 large groups in your class. Now, this could be because you're playing some form of a game. You might be doing Jeopardy as a really large group, and you can separate your kids out that way. Or if you're wanting to do this for like some of these smaller group versions, you could also do it that way. But in order to do 3 groups, 3 big groups of your students in your class, all you would have to do is think about the face. So I would look for even numbers, face numbers, and then odd numbers. And so I would pull those numbers out, separate how many I need based on the number of kids and how many would end up being in each group. And then you could have even numbers, odd numbers, face value, grouping themselves together. So another easy way of doing it. The next way that you could do it is by doing groups of 4. This was my preferred method of grouping my students. I have done it in the past where I've had 2 large groups because we were doing some form of a relay or something to that extent. But normally I will do 4 large groups when we're performing any form of a game like a Jeopardy or having them do either races or things to that extent. And in order to do this, it's very, very simple. All you have to do is look at the shapes. So you would do clubs, hearts, spades, and diamonds. Clubs, hearts, spades, and diamonds. And you could separate them that way. You don't have to think about colors. All you have to do is make sure that you have enough of each of the shapes on the cards to be able to separate your students. The final thing that you can end up doing is if you wanted to be a little bit more creative as far as grouping your students, you could just have them pair up with numbers. So you could pull 2 or 3 eights, 2 or 3 threes, so on and so forth, and then have them be able to pair up by the numbers or the shapes that you might have along with the colors. So like all the red diamonds come together, all the black diamonds go together. So that way you can create smaller groups of students but still be able to have them work collaboratively. What's nice is that this is fairly cheap and it's something that you can create variations throughout the year and not really have to worry about, again, grouping students, hearing the moans and the groans. Now, obviously, this is wonderful for when you're wanting them to do some form of a quick assignment or if you want them to hear different perspectives and you're constantly wanting to kind of change things up for them. However, there are occasions where you just need to be very intentional with the partners that you're picking. And this really allows for them to make sure that both voices are being heard because there are personalities inside of classrooms that tend to take over the conversation. And so you want to group them in a way that ensures that they have some say in the conversation. And so I did an entire video. I will link it over here for you somewhere where I talked about comprehension and having intentional partners and building some of that active engagement. So I go a little bit more in depth with how to create these partners. If you want to check that video out, you can just go ahead and click there. All right, so that is it. These are my favorite ways for building in opportunities for collaborative talk and thinking and getting students to be able to get outside of their comfort zones and working with their peers. I will say there is a lot of work that you have to do up front. You have to talk to them about how to be respectful. What do we do when we're disagreeing? How do we agree with one another? How do we add on to each other's thoughts? And so these are constant conversations that you're building with your students and ensuring that you're setting them up for success when they're working in either their pairs or their small groups. I hope that you guys have enjoyed this video. It's a little bit of a different twist here. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them into the comments. I would also appreciate if you would give the video a thumbs up, just like it, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you can get notified when I upload a brand new video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all next time. Bye.